Good evening, campers, streamers, and babysitters, and welcome back to our raw reaction review for Street Trash, the sequel, the requel, whatever this is classified as. I guess we'll go with those. This is a movie that I know we talked about on Sunday Scaries ages ago when this got announced, and we were like, oh, holy crap, this is awesome. I think we can announce now that we knew this was happening before that, because we have some good connects with our friends over at Screambox, and it had been mentioned to us early, or I guess late last year, early into the following year, that this was going to be happening and that this was going to be streaming on Screambox. So it is finally here. It took a year, but we've got it. And I gotta say, this will be a divisive review. This will be a divisive conversation slightly. And I will say that the thing that I've been a little shocked by is the divisiveness of when they're dropping these reviews. Because I think, and it's kind of shell-shocked, I guess, because normally I've seen Screambox, Cineverse, they want to get their stuff out there and they want to kind of give you at least a week to see it. Well, the embargo just lifted today, and we're getting to talk about it. And I'm kind of perplexed by that, because although, yes, this isn't a phenomenal film, this isn't something that's knocking everything out of the park, it's going to stick with you, I think there's a lot of fun here. And I think the fact that this is going straight to streaming, I really wish that they would have built a little bit more hype up around it.
Yeah, this seemed to be flying under the radar for a lot of people. Not necessarily people who are, shedding the spotlight on a lot of horror properties. Obviously, we are just fall by the wayside in that, in terms of we're always checking out different properties and stuff. So, we've been able to keep the pulse of this one, I think. But this one is really kind of just flying under the radar, I think. In Street Trash being... it's not Halloween, it's not Nightmare on Elm Street or anything like that, but I think this is a pretty prevalent 80s property in terms of when you talk about this, maybe Silent Night, Deadly Night, the stuff, things like that were kind of maybe B horror, you would say, where it is a pretty notable property, and it does pop up in terms of references, I think. So it's rather interesting to see this kind of rollout for this release here, because it is really... intriguing. It's something where we always have kind of this release date of when this is dropping, when we can get the review out, but it's all kind of just compiling up right now, I think.
Yeah, it was definitely a little strange, but nonetheless, we thank the folks over at Cineverse and Screambox for giving us this opportunity. And I will come out swinging and say I had a great deal of fun with Street Trash. I thought that this was kind of a rare treat of a film for me, because I compared this to you talking off air to things like Hobo with a Shotgun, those kind of grindhousey B-rate horror films, splatter films that we don't get too often. A lot of the times when we get something that I guess you'd consider to be a splatter film nowadays, it's more like a slasher rather than like a body melt movie or anything. I know body horror is starting to have a pretty big comeback. I think we're going to see a lot more of it after the reception of something like The Substance, which is just a completely different monster in and of itself. I mean, I wouldn't even compare the two here, but this movie has this aura around it, this flavor, this stench, I guess is the best way I could put it, that I just fell really hard for. I had a really good time with this. I thought that it's a quick flick. It runs right through its story. It's not making too many big impacts when it comes to its characters, its story. I think there's some likable stuff here. There's some stuff that is definitely going to make you cringe. That's definitely going to make you say, oh, that's what I came here for. The body melt stuff is perfection. And I think overall, I had a good time with Street Trash.
And this one, I enjoyed the original from the 80s. It's not something I regularly go back to. I think it's a bit of a heavy film. But when this one was announced and was going to be coming out, I was rather intrigued to see what kind of different take they were going to do, what different flavor they were going to bring to this one. And I got to say, opening up, this is such a strong opening, because we do get into the body horror elements, that kind of body melt subgenre, whatever you want to call it. You get a really good taste of that. going into this, and it really had my expectations set going into it after that the initial practical effect that we get, and then there's a rather interesting chase scene that is reminiscent of the original, just with a slight difference in there. And I'll say that stuff had me really captivated going into it. I think it was a perfect mix of comedy and just what they were trying to say and finding some fun with it. But after that, I got to be honest, I felt my attention and my fun kind of dwindling down as we got farther and farther into the film. But I'll say that from a practical aspect, from just those gross out moments that we do get, this film absolutely delivers there.
Yeah, this is just probably one of the most grotesque films of the year for sure when it comes to the body melt stuff. I would still probably give Terrifier 3 probably the edge there just because of how brutal a lot of that is. But this one, I mean, when we're talking about pus and green goo and all kinds of stuff, like they really show some impressive stuff on screen, and you get to see quite a bit of it, which was definitely what you absolutely are looking for when it comes to a concept like this. And I don't think they waste a single frame of it. I think that they absolutely go for it in the spots they need to go for it. They just let it all hang out, literally and figuratively. And I think that that's definitely the biggest highlight I can give the movie. I do feel that I wish that maybe there was a bit more attention to what we could have done with the story as far as just making this more memorable, because I do feel like a lot of the practical effects take, center stage here, as kind of expecting. But I do think that at the end of the day, it's a very paper thin narrative. It's not trying to do anything too difficult, which again, it depends on the kind of person you are, I think. You sit down, if you're looking for something that's kind of fun and disposable, you'll absolutely get that, in my opinion, with this movie. But if you are looking for something with a bit more to say, with a bit more bite, I could understand you kind of, like you said, kind of dwindling down with the fun, not really having those, connective pieces to kind of get you through the narrative. I could see by the third act you being maybe a bit bored just by saying, okay, we're going to get through this and that's going to be the end of it.
Yes, and I think, if your expectation is that to find a property that's going to live up to the original '80s film, I think you're going to be a bit underwhelmed here, just from a narrative perspective alone. It just is, like you said, paper thin. I wish we had a stronger narrative to really tie this thing together from gross out moment to the next gross out moment, because that's really, as I went into this, most of the comedy did not hit for me. I'd say 98% of it did not hit for me. It's just not my flavor of comedy. It really kind of takes me out of really being captivated with the horror elements, as well as what kind of narrative we could have gotten here. Whereas the original Street Trash, while it's not a horribly well-crafted film, it is rather rough around the edges. I think that film has a lot to say. It's got this kind of nihilistic vibe to it with its characters, and you find each and every character there really hard to get behind because of their choices. And it almost gets aggravating in a sense, I think, because you're just watching these human beings function. You kind of really get the deep, dark edges of society there. And it does have something to say there, where I was hoping Street Trash from 2024 would maybe take a different approach and tell something interesting, especially with what's going on in the world today, where you can kind of sneak in that social commentary and really say, while this is a great gross out film, it's got some great comedy moments, it also left us thinking a little bit deeper, or really developing these characters in terms of what they go through and how they're feeling. There are moments in here where I just don't think tonally it works. We have two characters kind of doing a song and dance for a second, and for me it was just really did not get me into the groove of what they're going through. When you look at the original Street Trash, it's got a lot of dark elements to it, and you really are in that life with those characters. This one, as I thought maybe we were going to get settled in, I felt myself being pulled right back out with the comedy and those line deliveries that really just didn't work for me.
And see, I fall on the other side of the coin here, because I thought that the cast was a lot of fun. I think that they really have a lot of great chemistry together, especially kind of our main three, if you want to say, of this group, with Alex, Ronald, and Chef. I really enjoyed the character of Chef. I thought he was a lot of heart to this group. I thought that he had a lot of really fun stuff to say and do, and I thought that they were, you know, a really good mix of personalities. And then you get onto your, you know, your extra characters with like Pop and Wars and 2-Bit. I mean, Gary Green is back. If you know Ryan Kruger, the director's other film Fried Berry, he played the lead in that. Very interesting concept of a film there. And I thought that they all really meshed well from a comedy aspect. I think that they all have really good timing with each other. And I personally thought that was another strong element of this movie for me. I just, again, I wish that maybe there was a little bit more stakes for them, a little bit more to do, because even though it's kind of a light watch and it's not something that I'm necessarily looking for the deepest, darkest story from, personally, I definitely could say that I wish that maybe we would have, for someone who enjoyed the characters, would have had a little bit more going on at the end of this film, a little bit more to say like, oh wow, like I can't believe they're going in this direction, or I can't believe they're going in this. It goes in almost a very formulaic kind of direction, and I was kind of hoping for a bit more teeth from it, I think.
Yeah, this one really just seemed like a lot of things that I've seen previously. That the humor here for me, you know, really reeked of like 2010, 2011 in terms of those line deliveries and in topical things that they're speaking about. And then as we get into it, it just seems odd placing in terms of scenes. There's I guess, more of an emotional dialogue here between two characters, which really felt out of place for me. It was nothing that I was able to lock in and really feel for these characters, just because we're so heavy in the comedy and we're coming out of a comedy bit trying to deliver these emotional lines for over 2 minutes, which just seemed like we stalled out for a second. And then we get right back into the comedy. And for that, it's a hard task to balance comedy and emotional moments. You really have to find that pacing. You have to pick your moments there, and I did not feel that here with Street Trash. There's another really emotional, well, supposedly emotional outcome for one of our characters, and we're playing the emotional music. We're trying to have these emotional expressions, and then we get right back into the comedy almost minutes later, and it really has a hard time locking into make you feel for these characters, at least from my perspective, where we're not really going through the normal beats. We're sitting down, we're talking, we're delivering comedy, and then we're trying to rip out these emotions from me, and it just did not work for me. So as I went through it, again, the practical stuff, that melt aspect of this is absolute perfection. There's only the substance you already talked about. That is another film that I can even would say is very similar to what we've gotten in Street Trash. There's so many gross out moments in here, but from a fun element, because we're dealing with goo, different colors and stuff like that. It's not as heavy, I think, as something like a Terrifier or a Substance, where we're dealing more so with blood, where this one was kind of a fun little side mission, if you will, where I had a lot of fun with those gross out moments, but from the character perspective, it just left me wanting a lot more.
Yeah, and I think that stylistically, from the approach here, I really like what Ryan Kruger has to offer. I think that he's got a very unique voice when it comes to his style of films. Whether you're in that kind of style, whether you're in with it or you're out, that's totally up to you. But I definitely think that he's got a very fun and unique vision when it comes to just presenting these things as being very dirty, down to earth, kind of wild out there concepts. And I definitely think that this is another one that I could see easily falling into the same universe as like Fried Berry. If you were to say that these two movies were kind of in one continuous story, I would completely believe it. And I think a lot of that too comes from the crossing over of cast members. There are more than just, of course, Gary Green, as I mentioned. You get a lot of the same players here with Ryan Kruger. He works with a lot of the same people. And I think that there is a little bit more camaraderie there from that. So I do sit in kind of a mixed point with this one. I really do. I think that there's a lot of good stuff that I enjoyed, but at the same time, I can't deny any of the criticisms that you've laid upon this one, Luke. And I agree with you. There's a kind of a weaker story than I wish there was. There was a lot of great visuals, a lot of great practical effects. We differ on characters, but in my heart of hearts, I got to say that I will watch Street Trash again. I will revisit this one. I could have a lot of fun with this, showing it to friends. So from my aspect, I'm going to give this a recommend. It's on the lighter side of a recommend, almost a worth a watch, but it's going to sit there for me.
Certainly. And I can see why. I think this film certainly has a place amongst horror fans. I think you kind of have to calibrate your expectations, so to speak. I don't think this one, in comparison to the 80s one, really does match up at all. I think that one is just so unique and of its own. I don't think you can do verbatim that sort of story from the original and transport it into 2024. There's a lot of dark elements there that just don't translate anymore. So, I appreciate the idea of making a lighthearted tone out of this one. I wish it was done. I wish the comedy and the emotional beats were balanced a little bit better here, and we got a deeper narrative to kind of really tie everything together. Like I said, I felt myself just waiting for the practical effects moments of this and really those gross out moments that I had a lot of fun with. But even those, I wish we gotten a handful more. There's an element in here where it just leaves you, there's a line delivery and more of an outcome. I wish visually we would have seen some more here, as this is a pretty quick watch. So looking at this one, I'm absolutely happy that the property of Street Trash has been dusted off from the 80s. It's something that not overlooked to an obscene extent. I think this one is on a lot of people's that original is on a lot of people's watch lists, and I think people are gonna be more intrigued to cross it off after seeing the 2024 version of Street Trash. So this one for me sits at worth a watch. I think it is worth your time from those gross out moments. I think we need more properties like this to be exhumed, so to speak, from what we haven't have just been dormant for over 30 years. Especially, we've talked about it, Screambox, Shudder, all these streaming properties can really shed new light on some of those forgotten 80s properties. So for me, this one's worth a watch. If this one pops up on Screambox, I think you could sit down, you could have a fun time with it. You just got to know you're going in for a more lighthearted tone. Jury's out on your stance on comedy and horror. That one is a harder task to really gauge on people. So I can say go in a little hesitant with that one. Maybe this comedy is for you, but I think this one is worth a watch. I think it's worth your time. It just isn't anything mind-blowing for me.
Very fair. But yeah, guys, let us know down below how you guys feel about this new version of Street Trash. Is this something you've been looking forward to? Is this something that's completely surprising you? I still think with this being on Screambox, with this being, it's going to be a VOD first and then Screambox next month. I think that it's totally worth your time to at least sit down if you love old 80s horror and just want to see somebody kind of paying some tribute to it. I definitely don't count this as a strike. I think that it definitely works, but it does have some rough edges for sure. So let us know down below what you thought of Street Trash. Also, I just posted a new video. You guys are absolutely blowing it up, and I appreciate it. Going over some of the most disgusting and gross horror movies that I've seen over the years. Definitely in line with the Street Trash conversation here. So give that a watch, give it a like, support this video. And yeah, I guess that's going to wrap us up here. We got some more content on the way this week, so keep your eye out for that. And that's going to wrap it up for this video. So until next time, I'm Dylan Newell.
And I'm Luke Janesco.
And remember, stay scared.
Do the horror shit, gonna do it live. Cause Splattercast kick it every day they live. Splattercast, 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 Splattercast,